What's up, guys? It's Justin with a KTOD deck building special. Today I'm going to talk about my Biggs combo deck, which is really inspired by the ideas from CJ from the tournament testing team on his pick for most busted interaction from Jump to Light Speed. So on the podcast on Sunday and then a follow-up video, the tournament testing team kind of all nominated their choices for most busted interaction with Jump to Light Speed and CJ has found the Biggs combo. So I took that idea and I kind of got in my workshop in my lab and looked at my leaders and how I wanted to play it. Um, and I've created a deck and I'm excited to share it with you today. CJ's been doing a lot of work on a different leader combination with this Biggs combo, which I'll explain in the next slide. But really exciting stuff that Jump to Lightspeed has given us kind of build around like sort of pieces or build around combos that maybe are good enough to inspire an entire deck. So we're going to see if we can do that with the Biggs piece. I'm also going to highlight a few of the other combinations and busted interactions that we talked about on our last video and think about where they could sort of slot in to in terms of decks. I'll do that at the end of the video, kind of thinking about what leaders they could slot into. And also I have a few that we did not talk about on Sunday that I wanted to share with you at the end of the video today as well. So without further ado, let's jump in to the combo itself. So the combo is essentially equipping Big Starklighter as an upgrade on Dilapidated Ski Speeder. So Dilapidated Ski Speeder is a 3/7 that does 3 damage to itself when it's played. So it's essentially a 3 forward damage. That damage can be a benefit, which is what our deck is trying to do, or it can be a downside in going against the Tarkentown decks. So what Big says is when he's piloting, he has 3 different sort of benefits that he gives depending on the type of vehicle. But we care about is this grit mechanic. So the Dilapidated Ski Speeder is a speeder. It's also important to note it's a ground unit. It's not a space unit. It makes sense from the Last Jedi. It's on the ground. So when you equip Biggs to this ski speeder, you have an 8 power unit based upon Biggs giving you 2 power from his text himself, his upgrade text, and also an additional 3 from the grit. So it becomes essentially an 8/5. That can actually grow even larger if you take some damage. I was testing it earlier today and played against a indirect Boba deck, and it got kind of crazy because I was actually able to put the indirect damage on the Dilapidated Ski Speeder and attack for 11. This is kind of out of nowhere. So pretty cool that you get this level of power with just 2 cards. It is weak to various combinations. Obviously, Waylay is something that can deal with it. An early Tarkin Town, like in a Django and a tap down, is certainly something that is problematic, right? So we are looking at ways to get around that, and we're also understanding that, like, hey, not every deck when you build it the first time is going to beat, the top tier meta decks, right? Like this might struggle into Django, this might struggle into Han. It's a reason why they're the top of the food chain. But this deck's very fun to play. It does very powerful, strong things, and it might not be tier 1 to start off, but it's a great thing to take to the casual gaming event at your store. I wouldn't necessarily recommend this, as a deck to take to Denver. I think you still want to focus on, mastering the top decks if you're getting ready for a sectional or maybe the Battle of Atlanta. But in terms of like a fun deck, sort of like you want to mix it up, you want to have some fun, you want to attack for a huge amount. I'm certainly looking forward to doing it at my local game shop. So that's the combo, which then leads you to think, okay, where do I go to make this combo happen, right? How do I engage this combo more often? How do I draw this into my hand more often? And then also, how do I do things that are sort of similar to it when I don't draw one half? Can I have other cards that replicate what Biggs does, replicate what Dilapidated Ski Speeder does, and then what leader I should use? So I've chosen to use Han Solo. That allows us to play a turn 1 Dilapidated Speeder. Allows us to play a lot of 3 drops. We can even play a turn 1 Biggs, not the end of the world. Still a turn 1 3/4. So we can kind of make sure that we have an early unit. We don't have to sort of waste time in other decks. We're not able to play Dilapidated Ski Speeder. until turn um, 2. The exception of Han 1 and Han 2 can play him on turn 1. But I've chosen to play this in this Han. You don't die to a turn 1 Tarkin Town, which I think is important. In Han 2, you would. Playing a ski speeder on turn 1 with like 5 damage, it just gets completely destroyed by Tarkin Town. So with this, we're basically playing that 3/4. They can put the damage in with Tarkin Town, but then they need to have a follow up, because if they do that, we can slam a Biggs right away and actually attack for even more, right? Our vehicle would be, what, 3 more damage. We'd be attacking for 11 on turn 2. So if they didn't have that tapper, um, they could potentially almost take half their life total on turn 2, close to half their life total. So I've chosen Han Solo. I think it works with other combinations in the deck. So without further ado there, we'll talk about, I think a little out of order here. Um, the other cards that are sort of resemble the pieces. So we're not always going to draw a dilapidated ski speeder. We're not always going to draw Biggs to slot on. So what are some other cards that we can play on turn 1 that are very powerful, that also get a benefit from being piloted and get a benefit from sort of being buffed up by Biggs? If we draw the Biggs but we don't draw the speeder, maybe we still want to equip the Biggs to one of our space units. So Millennium Falcon, Sabine's Masterpiece, and Red 5 are really, really strong on turn 1, because they allow us to A, play a overstated unit on turn 1, but B, between Wing Leader and Biggs, you can now make this giant monster if you don't have the ski speeder. So it's not quite as good, but there's some really cool interactions. For instance, if you play a turn 1 Sabine's Masterpiece and then you play a turn 2 red unit, you can ping right away. If you play a turn 1 Sabine's Masterpiece and then play a red 5, you can ping, and then red 5 the next turn can do 2 damage to that unit and kind of snowball. You can play a turn 1 Millennium Falcon and then equip it with Biggs. Then you can add it as an additional power to it. You could then play a Wing Leader on it. All 3 of these things are Rebels, so you can kind of get both benefits. So there's a lot of ways to make a really, really big unit on turn. Well, play a big unit on turn 1 and then make it even bigger on turn 2. So that's sort of how I built this deck. In terms of consistency, there's another few things that I want to talk about what we're doing, what base to use. Well, we obviously have to be red for Biggs, and we're playing Han. I don't really like Tarkin Town in this deck. We're not going to give a damage. And originally I had a 30-point base, but then I thought about something. I said, well, Thermal Oscillator is going to do a few things. It's going to allow us to draw the combo naturally more often. It's going to shrink our deck down, and then it allows us to use C3PO with a lot of 3-cost cards and really kind of draw those extra cards more frequently. So this allows, both of these cards kind of allow us to draw a little thinner, and it's been working out so far in testing. All right, rounding out our deck, we've got some heavy hitters that are not the traditional heavy hitters for the Han decks. Maybe Zori Bliss and Millennium Falcon are seen as like 2 of sometimes, maybe 1 of. But in this deck, I have the full 3 of all of these big smuggle cards, and then also the full set of Poe Damerons. And I'll kind of explain why. Because we're sort of getting so aggressive with our hand early, we're always playing a turn 1 3-drop. We're then potentially playing like 2 cards on turn 2. So Biggs only costs 1 to pilot. So we can pilot him and then also play another 3-drop, which requires us to put another card from our hand face down. There'll be very frequently, we'll have very few cards in our hand once we get to the Han flip turn. That changes a little bit if we're on a 3PO plan, but for the most part, we're going to have a situation where we almost have no cards in our hand. We have to put 1 card down just to activate Han to be able to flip. Well, in that situation, we want to be able to play a Zori Bliss or a Millennium Falcon. It sort of hits them out of nowhere. They might tap the Han down, and then we still get to use the full 6 resources there. And another nice avenue here is that we're kind of jumping off to a big lead by maybe playing a ski speeder with the Biggs on it, attacking once. They're going to deal with it at some point, because it does have the damage on it. They'll eventually be able to chip it down. So we've got to be able to figure out those remaining points of damage. How do we do this? Well, these 2 big smuggle units kind of come out of nowhere. The Zori Bliss has 7 toughness, pretty hard to beat. Millennium Falcon, in the space lane, 5/5. You can also pilot that we've drawn a second Biggs towards the end of the game. So these cards are kind of nice finishers that are harder to get off the table. And then Poe is a great card because we can just play him a turn early. You can essentially play him on the 4 resource turn, and if there's some games where he just completely takes over, even though you don't have a giant hand, um, playing a Poe a turn earlier is obviously fantastic. So pretty excited to play this deck. Again, I don't think it's necessarily tier one, but I do think it does a lot of really powerful things when it's unchecked. Unfortunately, the meta right now does have some answers in Tarkin Town and Waylay. Um, but if that ski speeder basically untaps with a Django on it, it can get, or with a Biggs on it, it can get out of hand quick. So this is where I'm at with the list. I'll go over a few of the card choices here. So you've seen the additional 3 drops. We've also got Cassian in there. Pretty self-explanatory that he's another 3 drop. He smuggles as well. He's a rebel. He's great. So he's got a lot of benefits. He's a red unit for Sabine's Masterpiece, tapping things down. Um, the original Millennium Falcon is still there just for all the benefits there. It's a little bit less good um, because you're more of like this combo deck, and you're not so much sort of a straight like play Falcon and Cunning type of deck. So I actually play Falcon sort of as almost like a removal spell or just that extra burn spell to do extra damage towards the end of the game. I'm not necessarily happy to play that turn one. I've got Spare the Target instead of Waylay. That's because of Forecast, I believe, and will probably be a card that ends up in the sideboard as a nice finisher. With 45 cards in your deck, Forecast seems to me like it has some upside. Blaster's another form of reach along with Surprise Strike. And that's really it. We get to play the full 3 of, um, every card's a 3 of because we're only having 45 cards in our deck. Again, the deck is so far has been pretty impressive. It catches people out of nowhere. Definitely has a rough Django matchup, but pretty exciting. I thought you guys give it a shot. If you're in the Discord, I will be posting this in both our Walkling tier as this image, just to sort of lock it in as the starting point, and then in the Kashik tier, I'll have this updated with a sideboard and any changes I make as I continue testing this deck. All right, this was my pick for the most busted interaction in Jump to Light Speed, and I don't necessarily think it is. It obviously has answers, right? Waylay. It's not impenetrable. You play a Kylo's Tie, you play a Darth Vader. They waylay it right away. They kill it some other way. Um, it has its weaknesses. However, if this gets rolling, it's so powerful. So, what decks do we include this in? Obviously, Django is the big one, but where my mind is at right now, similar to how I built the Bigs list off of CJ's ideas, like get an idea and then think about like, okay, what leader could I use it in? What base could I use it in? And could it sort of create this linchpin that allows a deck to sort of find its missing piece or to really take form? So with this, I want to share the leaders that I'm thinking about. Again, obviously Django is sort of a natural place for this, but both Kylo and Boba Fett are really interesting. Also, just in a straight Tarkin Town version, so not even a triple dark raid. So yellow with triple dark raid, but also like a Tarkin Town, being able to use cards like Aggression, um, Bo-Katan, just sort of like the aggressive red cards, the aggressive red villain cards. I think it's pretty cool in Kylo that you can, make that ship a 8 attack, which is pretty sweet on turn 2. Like that just seems absolutely bananas. Um, you can kind of see a theme here. I really like making these big upgraded things and forcing people to have an answer. So I think Kylo works. I think Boba Fett with the additional um, indirect damage off of the Vader ping is pretty powerful. So those are 2 leaders that have kind of got um, have caught my eye with this Vader combo. And you'll see as I build those decks out, I'll say, okay, well, what other ships can I use when you don't always draw the Kylo's Tie? What other pilot upgrades can we use when we don't always draw the Vader pilot? So a card like right here, pulled it out of my collection, this IG 2000. Could this guy be something that goes in? How about the new Dengar? Could that be a card that goes in? It's a 5/4. Seems pretty powerful to play alongside Kylo Ren. to develop potentially two 5/4s on the fourth resource turn. So I'm going to be building out. I'm going to have lists hopefully the next week or so in our Discord for these two. I'll post them in our cache tier in our first sort of set image in the walking tier, and I'll post the sort of living links in the cache tier. So this is a two more decks that I'm excited to build around. Another deck that I've been trying to figure out is Han Green and just how to build these Super Falcon. Um, Playing similar to the Han Red that I just talked about is basically building out a turn one ship and then playing a Chewbacca on it on turn two. In testing it, struggled a little bit, just like the other one against Django. But this is another spot where I'm just really interested in making um, the Super Falcon. I want to play a turn one Falcon. I want to play a Chewbacca on it. I want to attack for 7, and then I want to play a Han Solo on it, and I want to attack for 10, and then I want to play a surprise strike, and I want to win the game with that. So attack for 7, for 10, and then 13. So that's like my goal of how to build this deck. And there's some really cool cards you can play turn one. You can play a stolen hauler and then put Chewbacca on it. You can play blue leader ambushing, maybe taking the wind out of a space deck's sails before it even gets going. So Han Green is a deck that I'm looking forward to building. I do have that link already up there, that deck list, and it hasn't clicked so far. So I want to continue to work on it. I'm going to jump in the Han Green deck thread and be chatting it up. If anybody has any ideas on Han Green, certainly tag me and let me know. But it's a mini passion project. But it has fallen a little bit by the wayside. I'm excited to get that one going again too. All right, next up is this is a new one. So I didn't share this on our podcast, but this was sort of my second one where I was like, this Poe Dameron with Han 2 and also with Ewing reinforcements is really interesting because he equips as a unit differently than any other card that's a unit. So he equips if he gets played um, as a regular ground unit. So he can then sort of jump onto a ship, and he makes his X-wing so he can at a worst come in as a 4/5. With Han Solo's ability, that means you can make a 4/5 on turn two. That also means if you led with say a Poe's X-wing on turn one, or really any powerful ship, he can actually equip to that right away, and then attack for a bunch. So the damage that essentially he takes from being discounted by Han Solo actually goes away because he becomes an upgrade. So that to me seems like a really busted interaction that I'm looking forward to exploring. Ewing reinforcement is another way that sort of, you end up playing him as a unit for 4. He makes an X-wing and he might go on something else. You can picture him going on like a Bright Hope right away. And then that sort of is very sticky and hard for them to deal with. And then it gets to it's ready, so it gets to attack for 4. And then maybe you have a wing leader also, and you're able to put some tokens on it, or maybe you have a fleet lieutenant and you're able to actually like put 5 into something. So there's just a lot of really interesting interactions with how Poe works with these two cards. I don't have a list or really a template ready to go, but again, the creative juices are flowing with Poe, and I just wanted to share this interaction with you guys. And then the last slide, this one's a little bit of a funny one, which is maybe the most broken interaction from Jump to Lightspeed that we haven't talked about is your opponent's leaders and your bamboozle being a absolute blowout and a way to win the game. They play a space upgrade, you bounce to their hand, and their leader is destroyed. So the most broken interaction might just be bamboozle against the space decks. So um, you know, it's not a build around other than if you've got yellow, maybe just play bamboozle in your deck, and definitely in your sideboard, probably even if you're a villain deck, just playing it to blow out opponents' space leaders to create, people to rage quit and say, why was the rules this way? Why were they made this way? Even destroys the Luke leader, which says can't be destroyed. Unfortunately, the rules, it's a rule state thing, so the Luke leader does still die, um, which is unfortunate. So anyway, I hope you liked that video. A little disjointed, kind of talking about a lot of the swirling ideas right now. Definitely give the Han Red a shot with a lot of new cards, Thermo Oscillator, Biggs combo. Make it if you're like making giant units and attacking right away, attacking for like 8 on the second turn, or sometimes even more, definitely give it a shot. There's some really cool things you can do with it. This deck is it's fun to play. You get your games over quick, and give it a shot. And then if for the other ideas, the Vader Kylo deck or the Vader Boba deck or the Han Green, definitely let me know your ideas in the chat here. Or if you're in the Discord, definitely tag me and say, hey, here's what I'm working at. Let's work on this together. All right, everyone. I will catch you next time and hope you enjoy the video.